Tell me if this sounds like you. You're 15, 18, 28, 38. I don't really care how old you are, but you're working in a job that you don't love for a wage you think you could probably do better than. You either haven't gone to college or you have just to realize that all the classes that are required to even start studying the subject that you're interested in have nothing to do with what you're studying and will be irrelevant for you. And so you drop out. You know you want to do something bigger with your life, and so you confide in your friends, your family, whoever, and they say one thing: go to trade school. If you've heard these words before, you've probably considered it, honestly. Trade school is a great option for a ton of people looking to get into any kind of real construction-based trade or something in the entry-level medical field. On top of that, tradespeople make a pretty good income. Most trades are pretty stable. Everyone's gonna need to get their electrical components or their pipe fixed when it starts leaking. People don't really put that off. When an engine blows up, if you don't have the money to repair the engine, you're pulling credit so you can continue to go to your job. This makes working in a blue-collar trade a really good choice for a ton of people because it's stable, you're always gonna have a job, and there's room for growth and entrepreneurial activities within the trade itself. But the trades are not for everyone. I can tell you from personal experience, I've grown up working with my hands, doing manual labor the whole time basically. And while I find this to be the most satisfying work that I've ever done, extremely fulfilling, I love making things and producing value with my hands, it takes a big toll on the body. What if I told you there was a trade that you could get into that paid unlike the trades, even more than the trades, without having to sacrifice that health side of the equation? Today I'm going to tell you about another option, which is going to a coding bootcamp. Now, I already hear the PhD students in the comments saying, Colby, you can't tell people that they can just go to a coding bootcamp and get a job right out of that. That's impossible. I went to school for 8 years just to learn how to do what I'm doing now. I've been doing it for 15 years. Seriously, I hear you guys, and you're totally entitled to feel the way that you do. Just bear with me for a second here. I know it took a ton of time and effort to get to the place where you're at, and frankly, you're more qualified to enter this field than anybody else that just goes to a coding bootcamp or self-studies. But there is a caveat. There's a ton of demand for new software and web developers. That demand far exceeds the amount of people that are currently pursuing their computer science degrees, whether it's a bachelor's, master's, or PhD. Because of that, there's a ton of backfilled area that's available in the coding market for people that are self-taught or go to a coding camp instead of going the traditional college route. So 2 seconds just to say what a bootcamp is. If any of you haven't heard of it, there's a ton available in the US and internationally. You can basically go to these schools. It's similar to a trade school. It's an intensive 3 to 12 months, just depending on your school structure. You go, you study incredibly intensely, whatever web stack or software stack that you're going to be learning and implementing in your new career. And by the time you get out, you're relatively job ready. You've produced a few projects, you've done some mock interviews, and hopefully you have a really strong career support system within the bootcamp itself to help you accelerate into beginning your career as a junior developer. So with all that said, here are a few reasons why going to a coding bootcamp might be superior than going to any other blue-collar style trade school for you. Let's start at the obvious place to start, which is income. What do you make as a software developer? It's really important to consider the amount that you're going to be able to make doing one thing versus another when you're weighing the pros and cons of doing each. So the first thing we're going to do is look at these numbers. So come here, actually, let me just show you. So here is a chart that I was able to glean from the internet, finding different kind of ranges for wages of different trades. Just from looking at this, within the blue-collar trades, you have a median wage of about $43,000 to $56,000. When compared to software developing, you have a median wage of $107,000, and when compared to being a web developer, you have a median wage of about $73,000 to $74,000. So quite a difference there just off the bat. The lowest 10% kind of spells these numbers out even more. Lowest 10% of web developers being at $46,000 and lowest 10% of software developers being at $64,000. And then the top end is what gets really interesting. In the blue collar trades, the highest 10% earned within that trade is about $91,000, just shy of $92,000. Within software development, you have a top 10% wage of about $165,000, and with web developing, you have a top 10% of about $122,000. This is before you consider things like vested stocks within the company or options and bonuses. Now, when looking at the tuition rates, they're roughly the same for most of the trades. Keep in mind, this is a relatively crude chart here. This isn't the exact numbers, this is just an estimate. For any of these trades, you can expect a tuition at trade school from about $12,000 to upwards of $30,000. Software developer and web developer are the same, about $10,000 to $30,000 just depending on where you go. There's a lot of options online that are a little bit less supportive that you can go to, and you can still go the self-taught route as well, which is not free because you need to consider things like buying courses and hiring mentors to do mock interviews and get advice from, but it is an option. So what about job satisfaction? Well, according to US News, who maintain an updated list of the top 100 job satisfaction indices, none of these traits even come in the top 70. In fact, you don't get any until you get to number 74, which is electrician. Number 80 is relatively close, but that's restaurant cook, which a lot of people wouldn't even necessarily consider a trade because it's much higher risk, doesn't provide that stability that all of these other trades are going to provide you, and frankly doesn't pay quite as well either in most cases. Web developer, on the other hand, comes in place number 32, and software developer is even better, in fact, much better. It comes in at number 5 in the top 100 most highly satisfying careers to work, followed shortly thereafter by data scientist, which is another thing that you can go to bootcamp for and learn. But even if these estimates are off by half, picking the software developer route would put you twice as high in the index of job satisfaction than electrician. Even if you doubled the satisfaction for electricians and left the software satisfaction index right where it's at. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the entrepreneurial side of things. A lot of the times when you're working within the blue-collar trades especially, it makes a lot of sense to start your own business. And the same goes for producing code. And frankly, there's a lot of reasons why going into blue-collar trades to start your own business would be a better choice. Typically, starting a service business is a little bit more straightforward than starting your own enterprise or startup from the ground up. There's typically already a demand for the service that you're providing, and people need tradespeople right now to help them with those things. But there are things you can do to approach being an entrepreneur from the startup side that would be similar to working in a blue-collar trade. For example, beginning to take some freelance jobs on the side in addition to your day-to-day work, if your work allows that, would be a really good way to start making your own income. And over time, you could slowly build up your client base. Eventually, you would need to hire another developer to help you with that workload. And before you know it, you could build into a multi-developer business, and all of a sudden you have your own web development agency or app development agency. One distinct advantage with coding is that it's extremely flexible geographically. Basically, no matter how big you build your business, if you build the right kind of business in the right kind of way, you can be geographically independent. With a blue-collar service-related business, the bigger your business gets, the more tied you are to your geographic location. Even if you make $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million a year, if you're in the day-to-day operations of that business, you're going to be tied to your geographical location. Now, you can eventually work your way out of that and build systems in place to have hiring managers and people working under you that will allow you to move or travel on a regular basis, but that's a pretty far way down the line. With code, it's extremely modular in that way. Anywhere you can bring your laptop and have a high-speed internet connection, you can probably do your work from. The second distinct advantage is the scalability of code. In a service-based business, if you have more and more business coming in, you can only be as busy as the amount of people you're able to hire. And that includes marketing to find people to apply, filtering through the people to apply, getting interviews scheduled and executed, and then choosing the right person, buying all of their equipment, going through the training process, and hopefully they stick around to be able to help you over the long term, but they won't always. Obviously, you have to do this in coding as well. Eventually, you're going to need help implementing and writing code to be able to continue building more and more applications or widgets or distributing more product or services to your clients. But if you go the product route, there's a little less involved in it because eventually you have something that's relatively modular. It requires maintenance and updating, but It doesn't cost a lot more to get more customers to your website, for example. You just need a way to drive traffic. That's going to cost money to be able to drive traffic, but it's not going to cost nearly as much capital as it will to go through those 7 steps I mentioned to being able to hire somebody else. In the trades, your scalability relies on people. In coding, your scalability relies on exposure and capital. And exposure and capital typically don't call in sick. To close things out, I really want to drive the point home that there is absolutely nothing wrong with going into the blue-collar trades. In fact, on the contrary. These trades are what keep the world working. We need highly qualified individuals to be able to handle the everyday tasks that burden our miraculous way of living in order to maintain that miraculous way of living. If you're working in or plan on going into the blue-collar trades, I salute you. You are the reason we get to live the lives that we do, and we should all be more grateful to the countless men and women that work day in and day out to provide and protect the vital systems that allow our lives to thrive. If you've listened this far into the video, it's safe to assume that you're probably interested in coding or going to a coding bootcamp. Becoming a web developer is my mission of 2023, and so if that is of interest to you, I would highly recommend that you follow along to be able to come with me on my journey. Thanks so much for watching. There's more to come sooner than you think.